Because Karina noticed, rightly so, I can't gloss over the fact that this text does contain some things that are a little uncomfortable. Namely, this is a text written to a people who are about to enter Israel after years of enslavement and then wandering. And so when they are promised that if they share amongst each other, they will also dominate. And that's not unproblematic. And as I said to Karina, part of the way I can continue to read this and find meaning in it is that it was a people who were experiencing domination. And they were looking forward to a way to experience economic justice amongst themselves and not economic domination. And in fact, the domination that they were experiencing as enslaved people, they were part of that economy. And they were coming to a place where they could control an economy amongst themselves. And the other thing that makes it possible for me to read this is that there is still a lot of generosity in this text, and there's a lot of expansiveness, beginning with that first statement that Karina read, which is, every 7th year you must cancel all debts. Period. Like, that could be the end. Like, I wish we could just stop there. But because God knows that humans are human and are going to maybe not be able to follow that to the letter, there's more to how does this actually work practically as a community? And the problem is that it's going to take some work on behalf of this community to do that, and God recognizes that. Before I continue, what I would invite you to imagine is think about any debt that you currently have, or that at some point in your life, debt that you have experienced. As a household, as an individual, think about owing something to a person, to the bank. How did that feel? There are very few people who can make it any distance in this society and through adulthood. So young people, I'm sorry you have not had to have this. I mean, I'm happy you have not had to have this experience already. But there are very few adults who can make it through this life without accruing some level of debt. Student loan, mortgage, car payment, credit cards, medical debt. Our social and economic systems rely on indebtedness. Our economy depends on people accruing debt and being in debt to others and to corporations, and maybe especially to corporations. So now that I've made you imagine being in debt, I want you to imagine or to remember what it feels like to not owe that money anymore. To have made the last payment, to have been granted debt relief or been given a gift that allows the freedom of not having to make that payment anymore. What would it feel like at your most in debt to have that debt canceled, completely wiped out? In my experience, it has meant, first, increased financial stability and freedom, both to be generous and to be able to care for my family. And it is also a huge mental and emotional weight that is removed. We say that money can't buy happiness, but being debt-free feels pretty good. At least being at a place where that debt is not controlling your day-to-day decisions about whether you will buy groceries, about thinking about everything that you buy and making decisions about just the smallest things. All of the verbs in the first section of this text, they give the feeling of that weight being lifted, of that expansiveness that comes with that. The words are things like relieve, forgive, cancel, do not demand repayment, those are the words that start the beginning of this text. And those are instructions. If we follow those, or if the community that this was written to follows those instructions, they break the cycle of accumulation of wealth, of both wealth and of generational indebtedness. If they follow that 7-year cycle, this is a system that reboots at every 7 years. It updates itself every 7 years. Borrowers have the opportunity to get the help they need within that time when they need it, and they're not reduced farther and farther into debt, so that their children then will have to take on that burden. If you follow these instructions, the text says, there will not be any poor persons among you. Now, if we look around in the culture that is around us, the system of capitalism that we live with, we see a lot of both generational wealth and generational poverty that go deep, and in fact are connected to enslavement. I'm sure it's also global, but our experience is uniquely American, so we have that particular lived experience. This drive, especially here in the United States, for individual success, for personal wealth accumulation, for domination. That's the American dream. It's built on individualism and on capitalism and on competition, and borrowing and debt it's all a part of that. It's necessary in that kind of a system. So again, from my personal experience as a white woman with a white spouse, we have benefited from the accumulation of generational wealth. Literally have received inheritances that have allowed us to purchase our home and help from other family members when we needed to make student loan payments. My grandmother gave me a gift of several $1,000s that allowed me to pay off my student loans. I know we're not alone. I know that Joe and I are not alone among our peers in this experience, based on conversations that I've had with my peers. And I suspect that's true in this congregation as well. I had to take out student loans to go to college and then to go to seminary, but that wealth allowed me to pay them off earlier than I was able to. And now I'm able to, because of my privilege, pay for my daughter's college education. And so far, at least, after year 1, because her grandparents are also helping her pay for college, have not had to take out any student loans so far. Cross my fingers. My white forebears built up their wealth on access to seized indigenous land. And the exclusion of non-white people from being able to access those same privileges. My ancestors and my elders have home equity that they've passed down from generation to generation. They were able to take advantage of farm subsidies, get loans to build businesses. All of those are part of my historical history of wealth accumulation. I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable. I own a home. I'm sending my child to college. Now, my ancestors were not thinking about their land in this way. They weren't thinking, I'm going to take this from those indigenous people. Like their immigrant peers, they were thinking, I'm going to build something here. I'm going to take I'm escaping something. I'm going to build an opportunity here. This is empty land that I can take advantage of. And they were thinking about being able to worship freely and practice pacifism without being forced into service. Those were things that my ancestors were thinking about. For other families, accumulation has not been of wealth but of debt, which you all know already. Predatory lending, cash bail, wildly expensive medical systems that are all especially hard on people of color in our country and in our communities. Cash bail alone has meant the lack of $100, there are people who are sitting in jail, who are separated from their families, who are losing their jobs, being evicted, and then that in turn adds to that cycle of family and community members sending them down a spiral of having to struggle, having to scramble to make payments, find childcare, all for the lack of, $100 of bail. Now, there are churches and individuals who are trying to do what our systems do not, who are trying and succeeding to some extent within community. They are reading the Word of God in Deuteronomy saying cancel debts, who are saying forgive debts, who are saying be generous to your neighbor. They are doing things like buying up medical debt and allowing humane repayment, or just canceling people's debts, forgiving interest, paying down portions of the principal. There are some folks who are like me, who are giving up some of that inherited wealth so that someone who has inherited debt can instead experience just a portion of that experience, being freed from indebtedness. Now, obviously, in reality, these terms from Deuteronomy, they weren't written for systems or corporations or companies. They were written to a community of people, and not a very big community of people at that time, I'm sure. But companies and corporations are made up of people. I think it's true that they have a life beyond individuals, but they are also made up of individual folks, people who created the systems. And I think we should continue to advocate with those people and interrupt those systems. But these laws from Deuteronomy were, I will admit, somewhat of a smaller scale. So now I'm going to invite you to think about if you have ever been asked for money. Every single one of us, I'm sure. On all different levels, from the person on the street to the, college development director who's come and invited you out for coffee. Think about if you have been asked for money and if you have ever lent someone money and wondered if you'd get paid back. If you've ever decided not to give, even though you have a little extra, because there's no return on investment, or you don't know what they're going to do with that money. That's what feels the most uncomfortable, to me at least, about some of these instructions, that this is written to people with specific instructions. Lend even though you think you might not get it back. Because the Israelite community didn't have banks, they didn't have organizations they could go to. If they needed money, they had to go to their neighbor, to the person in their religious community to ask for help. And then that person, they were beholden to help their neighbor. I'm not sure about you, there are not too many people who I'd be comfortable asking for money. That is a hard thing for me to think about. I mean, my parents, sure. There have been plenty of times in my life when I've had to ask them for money, and when they've been able to give it to me, especially when I was a young adult. But now, as an adult, it would take a lot for me to come to my community, and yet there are people in our community whom we have generously given, to whom we have generously given. I was thinking about my local ice cream shop recently, down the road. Shout out to Creamy Cone in Rainier Beach. The banana pudding ice cream, at least it doesn't sound to me like it would be good, but it is. It's the best one. I would not eat actual banana pudding, but the ice cream is good. And it's a Black-owned business. They had their credit card system go down a few weeks ago, and they know that nobody carries cash. And so they continue to operate. Even though nobody could pay for their ice cream, they continued to take orders and give everybody ice cream. Every time someone came in, they would just say, please remember to pay us the next time you come in. Just keep track, please remember to next time you come in for your scoop, which is an incredibly trusting and generous way to operate a business. Because there's the risk, what if people don't remember the next time they come in to get their ice cream? Although if you've had ice cream once at Creamy Cone, you are definitely going to go back. But you might not remember. And it's also a way of building trust in their community, because if they shut down, then they lose that income for sure. So they're ensuring that their community is going to continue to have their back and continue to come buy ice cream with them. And absolutely, the next time I went in to get ice cream with my kids, I said, we had 3 scoops the last time too, so make sure you add that to the tab. These are instructions in Deuteronomy that are also about building a community of trust. They expect a level of comfort in asking for what you need, and also an expectation that you will give. When I am in need, I will ask. When you are in need, you will ask. And we build a community of reciprocity and generosity and trust. Because when you know, if I lend thinking I might not get that back, except if I am in need, I can also ask my neighbor, because it keeps going around in that way. I kind of love in verse 9, I guess you probably read, Karina, the Common English Bible, because that's what I sent you. Verse 9 says, watch yourself in the CEB, because God knows what people are thinking. People are thinking, oh crap, the 7th year is almost here. I am just going to keep my money for myself. I'm not going to lend anything in this 7th year because people won't have time to pay me back. I'm going to just save my generosity for year 1 when everything resets. But God is insistent, saying, basically, don't game the system here. And I'm noticing some of these verbs again. Don't be hard-hearted. Be generous. Give generously. Open your hand wide. It's like God especially wants to know, like, even more this 7th year, do more, do better, pay attention. And that kind of mutuality, both the giving and the asking, requires a lot of trust. It requires trust that this 7-year cycle will continue to reset in community. It trusts the community to continue that. It does carve out exceptions for outsiders, which annoys me a little. Fair. Like, God, why can't you just include everyone in this wonderful system? But it is really focused on building the trust of this community and also accountability within that Israelite community. If we're going to be community with each other, we will act like it. I recently joined the leadership team of the fundraising alliance in Southeast Seattle called Southeast Seattle Fundraising Alliance, which is a bunch of PTSAs who work together to share funding equitably within our elementary and middle schools, so that people who are furthest away from educational equity and income equity will be shared evenly among our schools. And we had our first retreat kind of meeting this summer, and we noticed, well, first of all, anybody who's from South Seattle and has never visited a North End school doesn't notice how much better North End schools are resourced, and vice versa. We don't notice that inequity until we visit each other. And so there was a bit of an argument within our leadership team about, do we want our mission to be about making sure every single child in all of Seattle has an equal shot at the same kind of education, by focusing on advocacy, by focusing on making sure that PTSAs can't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on paying for teachers, which they should not be able to do. Our schools certainly can't raise that kind of capital. Or do we want to really focus on building community among our schools in the South End so that we can really grow this model of equitable funding amongst each other, and then maybe that can grow out and out and out, build something beautiful, and advocacy can be a part of that. So that we build this idea of enoughness amongst us, and then invite people to see the beauty of this model. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge to do that kind of work of building community, building trust, building equity, and inviting people to understand the beauty of that trust. It's also a challenge to have the kind of trust to say, I'm going to give this to you, trusting that it will do what it needs to do in community. This money, this whatever, because it's mine. I want to think about that. My house, my car, my investments, my money, my stuff, my school, my program. It gets uncomfortable to hear God's commandment to give those things, to give generously and not necessarily expect a return. In SESFA, the Southeast Seattle Fundraising Alliance, we talk a lot about when we give to each other, in this equity model, it's like this high tide rises all boats. Like this is all of us benefit when all of our kids do better. And they're all gonna end up in those same 2 high schools doing better together, and everybody will succeed more. We're building a system, if we follow these instructions, we build a system of equity and community where we can trust each other to all respond generously, to all respond out of abundance when anyone has need. These are biblical instructions rooted in Sabbath. And we think about Sabbath as rest, like this is our day of rest, of recuperation. It's relief from work, but it could equally be framed as ceasing to produce. Sabbath is the day where we stop engaging in the economy. We don't make things, we don't grow things, we just don't participate in that system, which can take advantage. That's this endless accumulation. God gave a gift of Sabbath, not just so we could rest, but so we could stop, so we can remember to stop participating in that endless cycle of production. That practice of rest and reset in this sacred cycle of sevens is what God gives this gift. Every 7 days, every 7 years, and every 7 sevens Jubilee, and we're going to come to that later in this series to talk about what it means to have the big reset. We remove ourselves from the economy. We stop. We do so together as a community. We're in it together. So this big thing, which absolutely feels too hard to do on my own, it's possible. It's possible when we are in it together. And I pray that we may continue in this economy of trusting and mutual and generous community. May it be so. Amen.